Джереми Брауна про фазинг браузеров с различными крутыми трюками. Поприветствуем.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to my talk. I don't know if you caught my one earlier at 4 o'clock about hacking virtual appliances, but I'm giving 2 today, so probably the first time doing that. So hopefully my voice stays with me and you all can understand pretty well. Should go pretty well. As you said, my name's Jeremy Brown, and today, browser fuzzing with a twist. So this is a project that I worked on for a while past this year, and it kind of, I had a few different projects I've been working on where I've been consulting. And this is one that, I wouldn't say it's unfinished, but there's still a lot of work to do around it. But I thought it was important enough to share, and I really wanted to get the algorithm out there and get people kind of interested. And if you already have your own fuzzing framework, I think this could fit pretty nicely with what you already have as a mutator. So that's what I want to show you today, fuzzing with a twist and a shake, and I'll get to it. So quick run through the agenda. I'll go through the introduction, talk about some target architecture, infrastructure notes. This talk is fitting very well with browser, but really it's you can apply it to a lot of other things too, a lot of other PDF readers, things like that. And then I'll talk about Shake It, the new tool that I've yet to release. As soon as this talk's done, I'm actually going to upload it so you guys can play around with it. But it's the implementation of the technique I've came up with. I think it's somewhat novel. I'm not going to say it's 100% novel, but I think that it's definitely something I haven't seen so much publicly. And I'll talk about some of the things that are related to it. And then talk a lot about that, and then go in the conclusion and go from there. So again, you know my name. I'm an independent researcher consultant at the moment. I used to work for Microsoft doing Windows Phone, Xbox security. I was also in the malware protection center, so got a lot of exposure to antivirus stuff, a little more than I wanted to. Wanted to stay more in software security, so ended up moving to the Windows team at that time. I also worked for Tenable. You've probably might have used Nessus before. I've read quite a few Nessus plugins in the past, and also did some reverse engineering with at Tenable, trying to find more of the subtle patches. So that was fun times. So to be clear, what I'm not covering today, comprehensive browser fundamentals, is way too big a topic, take way too long. I would want to give you enough just to get your feet wet and to kind of look at the attack surface and know what's out there. And I'm going to be focusing on rendering engines. There's tons of attack surface other than that. Definitely things around the sandbox and IPC. But for this talk and what Shake It actually does, the fuzzer I'll be talking about, it's mostly, unless accidentally it attacks something else, it's going to be finding bugs in the rendering engine, most likely. So what I am going to be covering, as I said, the fuzzing engine part of the puzzle. Fuzzing is not, you need a complete system to fuzz. The mutator or the generator or whatever system you have to or whatever technique you're using, it's just part of the puzzle of a bigger picture. You need infrastructure, you need things around helper things to copy repros and try to debug crashes and get things like that. So I'm not talking about, I wouldn't say Shake It. Shake It is not a fuzzer by alone, it is a mutator. It's a somewhat novel way to mutate data that has had a little bit of success in incubation, fuzzing browsers in particular, but it's not a complete fuzzer. And of course, we'll be working with grammar-based parsing engines. So you can fuzz a lot of scripting engines, JavaScript, HTML, and even PDFs. Again, PDF readers interpret JavaScript, so this could be applicable in that area as well. And again, I'm not claiming I fuzz as good as Ben Nagy. He's professional, done a lot of really great talks on it. So if you want a really great talk about fuzzing, I would suggest one of his talks. But you're going to get a lot of hard lessons I've learned when covering browser fuzzing with how I'm doing it here. So why? Again, through my introduction, I didn't want the research just to sit on my box. I really felt like this is something I worked a lot on, and there's still work to be done, as I said, but I think that it was worth sharing, and I didn't want it to just, a lot of people have products that just, you have a great idea and you work on it for a while, and maybe it doesn't go the way you want it to go, or maybe it goes that way, but you just never finish it, or things like that. And I didn't want it to be one of those projects. I wanted to get the research out there in hopes that people will be able to take this and convert it to and put it in places where maybe they already have infrastructure in place. And this is just the easy snap-in example. But again, there's a lot of the talks too detail the process of how the fuzzing process goes, but I want to talk to you about the engine and talk about those details as well. So attack surface overview. You guys know the first thing when you're looking for bugs in a product, you got to know the attack surface. You got to know what you're trying to find bugs in. So this little guy, a pangolin actually, becoming one of my favorite animals because you can see he's all curled up and you got to kind of poke to see where you can attack him. So that's kind of the way I would visualize an animalistic attack surface. So all the credit here goes to Chris Rolfe from LeafSec, now at Yahoo. But he had a really great presentation, and I wish you could see all the reference. Well, I guess you can see it, I can't. About this. This is the attack surface for Chrome, and I just want to make it clear what we're looking at. What the fuzzer is trying to expose here is bugs in the rendering process. So that means V8, WebKit, which is now Blink, of course, and may incidentally look at some bugs at PPAPI, and well, I think that's actually deprecated now, but the native client as well. That also may be deprecated. Anyways, we're not looking at the broker process. We're not looking at IPC or some of that stuff. We're looking at the rendering process. So focus in on that. And for the reader perspective, this is some slides from Adobe, from their security team about protected mode. And it does a good job of detailing like how they talk to the file system, how they talk to the OS, reading and writing. And again, we're looking at the renderer, the reader part, which is sandboxed nowadays. But not looking at IPC for this kind of mutational fuzzing and fuzzer. So fuzzing options, there's a few different options here. We can go back and forth on it, but I think that the three main general ones is what I'm going to talk about today, briefly. Generation, so you either have a spec or you have a file format, you have something, and you create data based upon that. That's one technique you can use in fuzzing. And Peach is a really good example here. It can do a multitude of different things, but generation it's really good at. You describe a file format, it generates data, and you go from there. So Peach is kind of the example for generation. Mutation, ZZF, canonical example here. It's a pretty interesting fuzzer that does a lot of bit flips, byte flipping, different ways to mutate data and try to output something that may crash a program. So we have generation, mutation, and then you have kind of evolutionary, sub-evolutionary. I'm calling it, I really want to give this example because AFL is an amazing fuzzer. I found actually quite a few bugs using it. And I want to call this one code-assisted because it uses instrumentation to then figure out, what the best paths are to go down, and actually really kind of almost academic fuzzer, but it actually works. So this is something you can apply to, and this one's found a ton of crashes. That's why I really want to use it as an example of the evolutionary code-assisted instrumentation fuzzing. It's found bugs in I mean, you name it, PHP, OpenSSL, OpenSSH, even, and it's kind of it's more local right now, but I've actually modified it before, and I know other people have to fuzz remote servers. So I think a guy did some stuff fuzzing bind the DNS server. I fuzzed a little bit of what was I fuzzing? Dropbear, OpenSSH daemon. So you can modify it and write some harnesses to do remote fuzzing with it. So, anyways, I want to give you an example of today's modern code assisting fuzzing. So those are the three fuzzing options. You can go back and forth on it, but those are the three main ones. So infrastructure. Another thing with fuzzing, you need infrastructure. So like I said before, there's more pieces to the puzzle than just a mutator or a generator or code instrumentation. In my opinion, to have a more complete fuzzing framework, you need the engine, of course. You need harnesses. You need stuff that will allow you to get a deeper peek at your target. You need infrastructure. You need VMs, you need, if it's physical hardware, whatever it is, you need to be able to scale to, you can fuzz much more effectively like that. Target-specific support. I don't know how many times, I know you guys have maybe run into it before too, where you're trying to find bugs in a program, you're trying to fuzz it, you're trying to look at its memory, and there's just something either blocking you from doing that, either it has some special memory manager that you can't quite get good crash output for, or it has debugging enabled for a bunch of different options, or there's something trying to block you from fuzzing it, or maybe it's just unfriendly to people finding bugs. So a lot of browsers, you got to figure out all these crazy command line things to even get them running correctly. And all you want to do is process a web page. You don't care about plugins or all this other stuff. So target-specific report is super important. And then helper programs, things that will copy repros for you, things that will talk to a database that will log things to help you make sense of the data you get back from fuzzing. Super important. So as I said, fuzzing engine, generator per specs, mutator with different algorithms, and instrumentation. The local system harnesses, if you're fuzzing locally, you need a debug harness to catch crashes, a file system monitor maybe to catch things for interesting reads and writes, and definitely a dedicated database server. Fuzzing and copying things locally can work, but it's really not the best scalable way to do it. And then the scaling infrastructure, like I said, you need VMs, hypervisors. An army of droids is one of my favorite ones from JDuck. He talks about fuzzing Android a lot with those. Or even utilizing cloud providers. And there's a lot of like AWS, you have Microsoft Azure stuff. If you trust them with your data, then maybe you can use them for fuzzing too. Target-specific report, you need to have templates. Another thing, especially for mutation fuzzing, templates are a must. You got to have something mutate, right? The part of mutation, you take a known good file and make it possibly a bad file that'll actually parse and hopefully find a bug. And one of the target-specific support examples I've had here, WinApp Debug by Mario Vilas, great guy, great framework, put a lot of work into this Python framework. Very versatile. Tons of options for instrumentation. It's just amazing piece of work. But when I was using it to do part of this project, I was running into some issues around, kind of a bottleneck with the database server. So I was fuzzing so much and I had so many machines running that the server, I had a dedicated hardware for this as well, actually couldn't process everything on time. So, we had either, duplication of data, or we had just a ton of entries that were horrible to sort through. Using traditional methods of using SQL Server or something like that. And again, like I mentioned before, if there's modern memory protections that will try to make it harder for you to even to attach to the process, or maybe you got a huge amount of threads, or it creates different processes, and you got to figure out which one it is. So it just becomes a mess, and you can't expect maybe an open source framework to catch up to big changes like that. But WinApp Debug, excellent framework, totally recommend it. But target-specific support is hard to keep ahead with than the major corporations spitting out all these different targets. And then the helpers. So it'd be great to have polls, restart support, things like that. You don't want to be fuzzing forever, and then something breaks, and then it's like, oh, I got to start from the first test case. It's you can write different things to handle that, but definitely that's a good thing to have. Automatic repro and proof of concept generation is one of my favorite. I actually wrote a device driver fuzzer a few months ago, and one of my favorite features was not even the fuzzing part of it, but it was for every crash that occurred, it would create a proof of concept. Literally compile it, run it, and you can repro the crash. So that is really, really important for complete fuzzing infrastructure. Having stuff like that makes your life much easier. Backup mechanism, minset support. You don't want to be throwing a 10 megabyte file or something when you're only fuzzing 32K of the file or 1K of the file or something like that. So instrumentation, code coverage, obvious things here. So let's go into Shake It, the mutator that I've written that I want to discuss. But before we go into it, let's look at the current tooling around some browser fuzzing. So we have cross-fuzz, cross-document binding fuzzer by Elkomtuff, Michael Zowski from Google. It's a similar concept to Shake It, as it selects and reuses input fragments, but it does it a little bit differently and chops files a little different way. So the exact algorithm with this is a little different. Fuzzinator tokenizes a collection of input and builds all the test cases from that. Another interesting concept, still used, I think that one's actually one of the newer ones, maybe an academic project. I forget which university it came out of, but that was an interesting one that you can use for browser fuzzing. JN FunFuzz is a JavaScript-specific fuzzer from Jesse Rudderman, from Mozilla. Found a ton of bugs with this, still in use today, still relevant. I think he wrote it probably, 4 or 5 years ago. But it uses a generational method to create test cases for JavaScript. So he has a huge fuzzing oracle to know the grammar and to create interesting stuff from that. And then LangFuzz. This is one I looked at really recently. And it's kind of like CrossFuzz. Again, it does reuse input fragments, but the way that it does it, they all do it in a kind of a different way. And it is a grammar-based fuzzer, and that's the one from Mozilla, joint from Mozilla and Saarland University. So all these are the current tooling. I kind of wanted to give you a look at what tools are available, and why Shake It will be different. And I know it's kind of hard to tell from the brief description, but it does do it in a different way, and that's why I'm presenting it, of course. If it did the same thing, I wouldn't be here, trust me. So again, deviations from Shake It. So you can have dictionary and nesting. So defining a dictionary of valid tokens and then replacing them either by choice, by strategy, or randomly. And then nesting, either duplicating or multiplying tokens in a way, you can think of it as like cascading statements that always, are nested statements. Even recursion can work here to find bugs. But both of these are deviations from the way Shake It handles things. So here's the high-level algorithm. We have, I know you guys know that lady on the left, right? Taylor Swift. So her and a Shake It, that is the high-level algorithm. I'm going to assume you guys know that joke. But here's an even higher-level diagram, if you can tolerate it. So at its very base, you give it for example, we give it an HTML file. HTML file has a bunch of methods, attributes. Maybe it calls some functions. It defines things like that. You put it into the mutator, and it spits out something that is going to be great, hopefully. The point here is to, if you can't get it from the joke, shake things up. So I kind of like to use the analogy, you put something in a jar. You put a bunch of methods, functions, everything in a jar, shake them up, and then replace them in different directions to see what you can get to maybe have some interesting memory access corruption and things from that. So again, how it works. Shake It takes a collection of tokens or changeables. So changeables, again, just another word for tokens, a little bit more descriptive in this case. And it parses the file and creates a list of the changeables with data and position. It switches the data at random positions, and then it fixes it all back up and generates a new test case. This ideal is simple, I give you that. But the implementation of doing that is a little more complex. And having done that over thousands of iterations, you can get some really good mutations. Something that you couldn't do with a generational fuzzer, and that the other fuzzers I mentioned before just don't do. They do reuse, but it's reuse. It's not necessarily shaking it, as you will. So process, how would you use Shake It, for example? Step one, feed it templates. So it can be HTML, XML, JavaScript. Again, like I mentioned, PDFs take JavaScript, or they can run JavaScript. So you can feed it, the implementation I have, you can feed it a PDF file. It will find the JavaScript based on heuristics, of course, and use that to collect all the tokens and then mix them up in the way that it works. It can handle simple or complex input. So it can handle as simple as two tokens, for example. You got to have two to be able to switch them, obviously. Or it can handle something that's just a huge. You could take some huge page off a random website off the internet and feed it to Shake It, and it will spit out mutations. It'll probably burn your CPU up because it's actually not meant to handle quite that. But there's a threshold. But still, it will create very, very unique and mutated examples. And as you'll see, I'll go over it. It's found a few interesting bugs with it. So implementation-wise, people in here know C#, probably don't care about it. After I started using it, I kind of like it a lot. So it had obviously the implementation I have has modes for HTML, JavaScript, PDF, JavaScript. So you call shake it, the function, and it will use token to find all the tokens. And of course, it needs at least 2 to perform mutation. And I didn't want to use regex for this, but that's probably the most straightforward way to do it. Spent actually a ton of time coming up with all the different. So this is just one case for regex. You can see like I'm doing like some crazy negative look behinds and positive look aheads, and you don't want to learn all that stuff. Just copy and paste if you want to do this later on with your own stuff. Took way too much time to get this correct. Anyways, it has a bunch of heuristics to find a bunch of interesting things, like things in case statements, variables, attributes, method calls, just anything that would be interesting if you took it from one place and put it in another. And the browser is super, super vulnerable to things like that. It's basically like, if you guys ever did any browser fuzzing or browser research at all, it's a playground. So whatever you tell it to do, it's going to at least try to do it. And if it don't have a rule to say it's not going to do it, then you may get some interesting results. Therefore, eventually security bugs, hopefully. So if token match is successful, save the token, continue. And then we have shake.shuffle. And this iterates from the end, chooses a random index, and removes items from the pool until exhaustion. I know that makes no sense when you say it like that, but yeah, just take a moment to consume if you're really interested in the way that it works. But the approach I took was pull exhaustion, mix everything until you're done. And after shuffle, now we build out the mutation. So for each shuffle position, we take the new data and the position where it's at, and we insert it. But also, we have a huge other step. We can't just worry about the tokens. We have to worry about all the other data that was in the input. So we can't just put all the mutations back together, because now that's not very useful. We need to fix it back in a way where it looks legit. It looks like the original file, except everything is screwed up in it in a strategic way. So after that, we write to output and repeat as many times as you want. You can do it 1,000,000 iterations. I've actually did it 1,000,000 iterations. Depending on your input, it can take a while or not, depending on your computing power, of course. Obviously, we don't care about collisions here. I just give everyone SHA-1s. This is not security. This program is not security sensitive, so you don't have to worry about collisions. If we get them, it's fine. Don't do that otherwise, though, obviously. So example template, again, I was talking about all the tags, attributes, functions, objects, parameters, methods. These are all really good stuff, because if we make a function call, maybe the function doesn't exist. Maybe we redefine the name of the function. Maybe the attribute is valid in one case but not valid in another. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong here, and the way the browser is interpreting it, it's kind of looking to make mistakes. And again, HTML, all these parsers are super forgiving. So it doesn't matter what you feed them, they're going to try to render it in 99% of the cases. So, man, I wish okay, this looks better. So, man, there's lines in the middle. Okay, so a little deeper view. So we get a list of all the functions, methods, tags, attributes, all that stuff. We have 2 lists at this point that we found. We take those two lists, and then we fix everything back up. Positions, data, and then we output it again to the output file. Again, just a little deeper microscope on that. So hope everyone's clear how the mutator works implementation-wise at this point. So again, the strategy here is trying to confuse the rendering engine. We're mixing everything we can, basically, and we're trying to put the browser into a weird state where it's likely to make mistakes. It's likely to access memory in an interesting way. It's likely to read memory in an interesting way. That's what we're looking for, is memory corruption vulnerabilities out of this technique with fuzzing, with mutating. So a couple of mutated examples. I know I gave you like one very contrived example. I'll give you 2 or 3 of the ones that I actually ran a couple of days ago. So this one, I don't have the originals. These are just the mutated copies. But you can see it kind of looks pretty interesting. You can see jQuery's making a bunch of crazy calls with just weird data being passed in. It's calling .click methods. I don't even know if .click's a legit jQuery method. Maybe it's not. I wonder what happens if it does. Some of the attributes are being defined as HTTP is being defined as slow. We have URLs being defined serendipitously, alt tags. Everything's just screwed up with this. And we have a function define call on the jQuery for the previous call function, which is also passing a member object. Recipe for bugs, hopefully. And this one. So this one is actually JavaScript. And this is one of my favorite ones, messing with JavaScript, because we can, in the CSS properties, which, this is probably going to be invalid and not going to work, but we actually have function calls in the CSS properties. We're declaring variables that are using inner.html. Who knows if that's even valid? It could be in certain cases, and certain cases not, but it may try to dereference it anyways. So again, all fun stuff here. And this one, we're trying to, I think this is, we're doing some XML or SVG. So this is like a mutated SVG file where we're trying to, we're assigning variables to function calls and getting return values. We're setting all kinds of different attributes and methods to wild things. And we're just creating havoc on the renderer in an attempt to find bugs. And these are some of the interesting examples that can be generated using this shake it mutator. So step 2 in the process, once you generate the however many mutated files you want, take that collection, put them on a web server, put it on the file server. This is where your debug harness comes in, or your helper files, your target specific support, where you're able to make it accessible to the browser either through command line or through maybe you have some hooking function that just makes it flip the page to the next iteration. However way you want to set that up, but step 2 of the process, get it to the target. And step 3, after you iterate over the collection, again, highly recommend using a database of some sort. Try not to do it locally. SQLite's good for some things, but it's just going to create a bottleneck on your local machine if you try to do that, and then you're going to have to collect all the databases and merge them. Could be a mess. So centralized database reporting when you're fuzzing is definitely one approach to do it scale-wise. And hopefully get some promising crashes from that. So again, the implementation written in C#, algorithm is completely portable, and I will make the tool available, fully functioning tool. Give it some input, either HTML, JavaScript, XML, or give it a PDF file, let it mutate that JavaScript, see what happens. So in incubation, so when I first started this talk, I told you that this is one of the projects that I worked on for a while, kind of fell off. These are some of the lessons I learned from it, and there were definitely some hard lessons to make. I actually came across some promising crashes, for example, in Chrome and Firefox and apparently Opera, because I have that logo down there. But I wasn't able to determine, first of all, if the crashes were from the renderer or if they were from attach, or synchronization issues. So kind of a fail there. And you can't, and it's really hard to say because I kept getting the bottleneck with the infrastructure. I was using the database server, but the database server was getting so overloaded that it was really hard to get repros. And when I did get repros, it was hard to determine which one was affecting the target, which made it crash. So there were actually some interesting crashes, but through infrastructure problems, it was really hard to have them and debug after that. But a few of them did get by. For example, did find multiple crashes. Again, this is incubation. I don't have the full-scale infrastructure, but using this in a minimal infrastructure, these are the results. A few crashes in WebKit, GTK. Again, some of them didn't repro. There was some invalid access on garbage collection. Sounds interesting. An unremarkable crash in KHTML. Conqueror uses that. I was fuzzing Conqueror a bit. But mostly just continuous memory allocation copies. Not really interesting. Did find an exploitable bug in NetSurf, and if you've never heard of it, it's fine. It's a really popular embedded browser for a lot of embedded devices. It was a corruption of internal pointer structure, and it was triggered by mutated tag property. So when when ShakeIt mutated the file, and I used it for fuzzing, it corrupted one of the tags and replaced it with an invalid one from another part of the file, and triggered this vulnerability. Another crash in Photon. So Photon's kind of like an open source VLC plugin. Not plugin for VLC, but VLC plugin for a browser. And it was, again, triggered by parsing multimedia content tags. So, where you try to put music, embed videos into a web page. It did some mutation there and was able to find an interesting crash. So, challenges, lessons learned. Definitely having a comprehensive harness, something able to scale, will give you a much smoother process, smoother than I had at that time. Without a complete system, it's tough to be successful. And again, these are just incubation results. This is one reason I really wanted to get out there. I've been, a few friends of mine have had a look at it as well, and we're trying to really get it in a good infrastructure. Oops, am I heading next or not? So future work. So if you have an infrastructure, if you have a fuzzing infrastructure already, and like some of the ones, for example, Hoyson's Nightmare Fuzzer, if you guys ever seen his talk on that, did a bunch of antivirus research. Anything you have at home, if you already have a framework set up for this, I'd love for you to either re-implement ShakeIt in whatever language your framework's in, or take ShakeIt itself, just use it as a mutator, host the files, and run it through, and see if you have any luck. And then even perhaps a Metasploit auxiliary module. There's a lot of fuzzing modules for Metasploit, and I don't think it'd be that hard to port it over there as well. So again, fuzzing is more than a mutation engine. In this case, I'm showing you a mutation engine because I believe this one's somewhat novel. But you need more than that to be really successful at fuzzing. I think ShakeIt has a ton of potential, but the investment on tooling is paramount. The investment that I put into this, and even though it was an incubation, I got some interesting results for the work I put into this. And again, more complexity, more bugs. That's a given. Code review can be really expensive, and if it's for something that's really parsing complex data, it's going to be hard to get right anyways. It's going to be really hard to know and to study the file in order to get everything out of it. Again, logic bugs, manually pen test is great for that. Does anyone really see software becoming simpler? I mean, it seems like fuzzing is just going to, I keep hearing, fuzzing's dead. We got all these companies running fuzzers. There's still tons of bugs every day. I don't think fuzzing's dead. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think software is getting more complex. It's not getting simpler. And maybe a lot of the low-hanging fruit's gone, but there's a ton more that's probably coming out tomorrow. And I always want to put this point here. Sandboxes cannot save you from bugs. You just need one more. SDL can't save you from bugs. There's just too much code, not enough eyes. Mitigations cannot save you from bugs. They only make you need, longer to write an exploit for. And honestly, managed code is a positive step forward in this direction. You don't have to deal with a lot of the issues you do in C and C++ when you write managed code. And that is what I got. So I will go to, I have one guy who really wants a question. I will go to questions. I don't think the microphone's on.
I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't really careful in listening to you, and I couldn't get your joke about Taylor Swift and ShakeIt. How you detected bugs, memory errors, debugger or some instrumentation maybe?
So when I talked about WinApp debug, the framework I talked about, let's see, go back to it real quick. So I use WinApp debug as a framework to do a lot of the things for attaching to the process, to launch the process, to get crashes, to send them to the database. So let me go back to that real quick. Yeah, so WinApp debug. That is the framework I used for the harness, and that's what I was talking about. I did run into some issues, some bottleneck issues. Some of the more modern browsers keep changing the way they maybe their memory manager or some kind of anti-debug techniques. So that was it's hard for the maintainer for this project, even though it's a great framework. It's hard for him to keep up with the new changes like that. So it doesn't work for every target.
It seems that it does some binary instrumentation, right?
Yes, it does. But
It's own written or some popular framework, Pin or Dynamo Rio, maybe, or something else.
yeah, so there's potential here for a pin plugin for this. Again, I've worked with pin before. Not my favorite one to work with. So I guess that would be the reason I didn't go with it here. Is I was trying to get WinApp debug to work for the time I had to work on this project. But yeah, pin could be a solution here for that, assuming it's able to stand up to some of the modern anti-debug stuff that's going on. I know a lot of it wouldn't affect it, but there's still some really subtle things with certain targets, like Chrome, for example, is kind of a pain in the butt to debug sometimes. So I'll be interested to hear results from pin on Chrome for fuzzing. It'd be good.
Well, thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I think we have one here.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Am I right that what you have developed already is something like a proof of concept targeting browsers, mainly browser engines themselves, and you envision extension of it to any possible target, like I don't know, I have an API which accepts JSON requests, and we can shuffle, I don't know, properties in the JSON object I accept, for example, right?
Yeah, so I would have 2 points on that. One, I did not mention that, yeah, there are some APIs where it would make it a lot easier. Instead of running the browser, you could just run, pass the data directly to the API. That's a very good point. The other point, I would say that that would work in a lot of cases where you can actually rip out the renderer from the process or the target. But some of the closed source ones is ones you can't really look at from that. So you're envisioning where you have like every browser engine, every renderer, and you can just fuzz all of them without having to start the target and things like that. That'd be great. But we don't actually have all the source code that I know. I don't have the source code to all the different browsers. So stuff like Internet Explorer, I know Chrome's open source, Firefox open source, Opera I don't think is. I'm not sure. But yeah, that would work for a lot of the browser rendering engines. But I don't think there's a universal approach for that I'm aware of. But that'd be great. That would be great.
Yeah, and kind of probably idea for the project. Just now we were listening to another report, another presentation regarding like mathematical approach to structuring.
There's a lot of math on that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, they are attempting to generalize the concept of injection. So it's not exactly what you are doing, but you probably could reuse their approach because injection needs well-defined grammar to define what is ejection, what is not, and shuffling needs the same actually.
So you're talking about injection into the process, right? Is that what we're talking about? Injecting code into the process to hook something.
Injection anything anywhere.
Okay.
They're trying to make it as abstract as possible.
Okay. There's a lot of new technologies making that harder, though. If you look at some of the like Windows 10, for example, a lot of the processes you can't even kill. You can't even debug. They're like either signed by Microsoft, for example, or there's some technology that makes it where it's even harder to reverse engineer. You can still reverse engineer it, but it's harder to attach to it, and there's got to be bypasses for that. A universal way to do that, I feel like it needs to overcome some obstacles from the engineering side of the target as well.
Yeah, but I meant more the mathematical engine behind it. So they use their engine for injections, and I think you can reuse it or slightly modify for your purposes.
Yeah, it definitely sounded generic enough to reuse it for fuzzing. Definitely. Cool. Yeah, I'll have to look at that paper. I was half paying attention, and it was in Russian. My Russian is niet. So, good question. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
a simple question.
Sure.
Could you tell us what browser is the most safe one, to your opinion?
That's a simple question? I don't know. That's a
According
loaded
to your
question, maybe.
tests, I don't know, and your knowledge.
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that. I don't know if anyone is really. Yeah, I don't know. I would say the system. So when I think of like secure browsing, when I look at systems that are, and like I hate to like go to the tablet way and like all the Apple way of like having everything isolated and everything where you can't run your own code, but that seems to be like code integrity and signing seems to be a really good solution for even if you have a bug, being able to put different stuff on the system to exploit it and making payloads that much harder to run in memory. There's always some bypass that's going to remove that restriction, but I would say instead of answering what the most secure browser, I would say look at the platform and you won't have to worry about it as much. It's the best answer I can give. All right. You can follow up if you want. Don't ask me what the most secure platform is. So, all right. Thank you. Any more questions? The box is floating around. Who would like the box? Anyone? Anyone? All right, I'll be around, and I'll be, as soon as I get home, whatever time it is there. I got here today, so I'm a little confused on circadian rhythms at this point, but I'm going to upload the tool as soon as I get home, and let me know if you have any more questions, and I'll be around, and hopefully see you all tonight or somewhere tomorrow. Thank you very much.